Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, my name is Parker Rogers, and I am joined by Carlo Scalisi, who's going to teach us about analytics engineering with DBT, a fintech application. And before we get started, since this presentation is going to be all about DBT, I just want to see from the audience, have you implemented DBT? Let me pull that up. And we will see. And I decided the third option, none of your business, because you don't have to tell us. We'd love to know, but you don't have to tell us. And yeah, you guys just click on those answers, and we'll see what people are saying. Okay, so we got, I love that people answered none of your business. Awesome. Well, it's changing. Okay, so it's a really good mix, it looks like. That's awesome. Okay. So with no further ado, I'm giving the floor to Carlo. You take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Carlo Scalisi. Today I have the pleasure of talking to you for a little while about DBT, a tool that seems like some of you already know, and how we implemented it at my current company, N26, which is a German fintech from Berlin. Let's look at the agenda very quickly. Yes, I'll introduce myself a bit more, talk about my company, N26. Speak about the data team. That's what I belong to in my current role. The evolution of the data team, how we got to the decision of implementing DBT. Then talk a bit more about how we actually practically implemented it. Some immediate results, some challenges. A look at where we stand today. 3 years in, we implemented in 2019. And what's next? What's the road ahead like for N26 and let's say analytics engineering at large. And then we have 5 minutes for the Q&A as with every session. Okay, let's get into it. Okay. So my name is Carlo Scalisi, originally from Italy. My current role is I'm a senior data analyst at N26, again, digital bank from Germany. I have all my experiences mostly in consumer tech, you could say. I worked in Germany and in the US. My first role was in food delivery for a German company. Worked for a US business, Wayfair. I'm sure all of you know it or have heard of it. That was actually my first ops role. I was working in internal logistics. I was a business analyst there. I moved to N26 about 4 years ago, 2018. I worked in the Berlin office initially, then moved here to the local one in the US. My formal training is actually in economics. I guess not so uncommon, but it's mostly because when I went to school, there was really no an opportunity to study analytics or data science, like in a very formal setting. Maybe would have done it now, but it wasn't. I had no chance back then. I'm still like what I studied, though. Practically in my day-to-day job, and not so much relevance. Yes, some fun facts. Stereotypical, I know, of pasta. Try to do as much as I can. I have passion for everything with two wheels. Used to have a motorcycle. I currently live in New York and I bike there. It's always an experience every day. And yes, I love the sea. I just got my scuba diving last month. I was back home in Sicily and finally did that. All right, let's talk about N26 now. There you go. So it is a new bank, one of maybe three you've heard of from Europe, the one being Monzo from the UK, Revolut 2, UK based as well. We are fully licensed, like some of them. German license took some time to have it, but we have it now for 5 years. And in essence, the business is about very simple to use checking account with sub accounts called spaces. That maybe you see in the screenshot, or a financial product that either we offer directly or we go through a partner. And at its essence, we are a very app-centric company. Product is really the language we speak every day. Definitely, it's one of the most important department in our team. And it's the reason why we've had success, having a beautiful and easy-to-use app. And if I could say something, it's a large organization now, but when we were just a scrappy upstart in Germany, I would say we definitely started this change. And I don't know if any of you have lived in Germany or German. We kind of put a splash in a very, very conservative, sometimes backwards financial service industry in one of the largest economies in Europe, but nevertheless, sometimes a bit too conservative. Anyway, more about N26. So these are some numbers. I won't get into them. except the markets. We mostly are active in Europe. We're just starting our Brazilian business to be launched, I think, if not this year, the next one. We used to be active in the US till this year. I joined the company at an interesting time. It was 2018, just before the first big funding round, Series C. I was staffed to support. It was the first marketing analyst. I was definitely came an interesting time because I was staffed to support the expansion of, at that point, a very small marketing budget. Most of the growth was organic at the start, and so definitely lots of challenges there for me as an analyst. Early 2020, I moved focus, started to support the local business in the US and supported the S&O, strategy and operations team. Probably the reason why I am in the OA club today. I've changed a couple of offices. In both of them, I could say one of the reasons I like to work in N26 and I've been there some time is we've managed to go through hypergrowth. 2019 was a tough year in that respect. Exciting but also challenging. But we still maintain a very good team. Collaboration and driver to some of the things that I found in both offices and very much enjoy in seeing every day. And maybe more importantly, on a personal level, the stellar data team, the one I belong to. And actually, let's talk more about that in the next chapter. So yes, some very short timeline. 2015, I guess that's when the business officially started. It was called N26, number 26. Just had one data analyst. Then now is the team lead for general organization. He had some support from interns over the years, but when the first big funding round came, we also expanded the team and we had proper analysts staffed for each business department. I was one of those. Then we had people in operations and product too. 2019, big year. We launched the US. We also launched our first separate data warehouse, stored on AWS servers, actually outside of Europe. That's we're regulated business, so we have some laws we have to follow. But more importantly, the launch of DBT, which I guess followed the growth and the change of the size really of the data we had to deal with as a data team and the new tools we had to adopt. I think it's a testament to the reflection of the importance DBT has in our org today. Is that just this year we launched a new analytics engineer role. We're standing up a team that will pretty much solely focus on our DBT project and making sure it's ready to go into the next phase of our growth. Our team is made up of 3 sub-teams: data analytics, the one I belong to, mostly working with other N26ers on like internal analytics and reporting. Data science, mostly working on machine learning models that shape the customer experience. So think of chatbots, think of transaction categorizers. And then there's more of the 3 data engineering team, DBAs, database administrators, and data warehouse engineering, which is a team we definitely have interacted a lot with. And it's just one team. As we stand, no analyst is embedded into the business department. So even the ones I mentioned before, we're still data analyst working for the central data team. Okay, how we get to decide that we want DBT. So for most of its history, I would say till 2019, virtually all of the pipelines we ran were managed by the data warehouse engineering team, a very small team. There were 2 for most of the company's existence. Now we're definitely more, not many, not enough, hard to hire. And at that point, most of the data we had in the data warehouse was pretty much just writing directly from the backend microservices to power, the app experience to read the business as we know it at N26, and some external pooling from Salesforce or Snowplow for tracking. We, as data analysts, we had our own really scrappy, I would call it light ETL and automation service that we would use to do things like, and it was fully owned, still is fully owned and managed by us. Things like pulling from marketing APIs, think Facebook, think Google, either push actually or pull. But anyway, that was a way also to write direct to the data warehouse without going through data warehouse team, which at times was a bottleneck. Just had other things to think about. Through that, we still had some more advanced data models, I would say, like an attribution model running to that service. A model that we used to track the number of MAUs. Think of like of a log with activity times, also done by the service. But that's pretty much it. It was really hard for us to, independently go about creating new data models that would apply some sort of business logic, right, to the data, to the raw data sources that we have in the data warehouse, and ultimately, provide some information that would power either some reporting on just like advancement of business. That is up until the introduction of DBT and I call it reform movement. No one wanted to be reformed, but it definitely changed for the better, or revolutionized really the way we work with data, N26 as data analysts. So some of you know DBT. There's a poll, and I'm looking at the screen now. I don't see the answers, but there were some people that already definitely knew it. Stands for Data Build Tool. Silly acronym, if you ask me, but it's a good tool nevertheless. Yes, the website would say that anyone that knows SQL, really declarative SQL, can build production grade pipelines. It's not just propaganda. I think that's definitely accurate. We had a team of data analysts that, for the most part, only knew, let's say, non-admin SQL, so nothing to do with drop and truncate and grant, those kind of statements. And just like the knowledge we had, we were able to really progress the output and the quality of our work. DBT comes as I think as many libraries. We use the Python one. It might be just Python, but it's in its essence, it's a command line tool that you use to run data operations, create models, update them based on declarative commands, say like select from this table and do this transformation logic, without having to worry about the admin that comes with managing a database, but also some very nice features you see here on the slide. Docs that pretty much come out of the box. There's some effort in it. I'll get into it in a bit, but as soon as you put them in there, they just maintain themselves pretty much. CI/CD integration, very powerful for like running unit tests within DBT, or just testing on the data itself. It's not actually the objects that it supports. And very importantly, dependency management through the docs. In just a couple of commands, you're able to have a very powerful visual view of your dependency graphs based on on the pipelines you set up in just through the web server that they offer. We run the DBT core. DBT is really an open core product. There's a open source tool that we use, which is purely command line interface based. We use it through Python. It's our production language. But there's also a DBT, I think it's called DBT Cloud. Yeah. As the name implies, it's hosted by them. You don't have to mess with running it on a server of your own. And it comes with a very nice web-based IDE tool too. But its essence, both of them do the same things. There you go. Okay, immediate results. I just touched on it right now, but if anything, DBT has made us fully autonomous, being able to fully take ownership of the entire lifeline of a data pipeline, from the design to the creation phase, implementing it, maintaining it, all through the DBT interface. Without, at this point, and I mentioned this was a bottleneck, without almost an interaction with the data warehouse engineering team, it kind of, let's say, gave us the tools that we wanted to do the job that we needed to do. It definitely improved the quantity of models. I only mentioned 2. We had maybe, less than 10, let's say, business logic data models, let's call it that way. Now we have hundreds. We'll get to the numbers in a bit. But definitely the quantity improved. I would say also the quality. We were able to do things that we just couldn't have done before because of the constraints we had and the engineering time we had available. But we know with lots of power comes lots of responsibility. I wouldn't say we were responsible, but definitely having so much free reign has had some unforeseen consequences. We'll get to it in a bit. But let's talk about how practically we went through the implementation phase. Okay. So yes, first off, we had to create honestly hundreds of markdown files. This is the I think started in YAML. Yes, this is the basis for DBT to be able to compile a kind of a documentation website. I mean, the website is the front end, but in the back end, there's a whole host of data objects that you have to create in the DBT project through use of these YAML files, which this essence will say name of the table, description, maybe if you want to be so kind to whoever consults the wiki, and then a list of columns. And I think you can even put the data type, set some text on them if you want, and then a description of what the column does. We had some wiki that was stood up. It was only living in Confluent and had no relationship with the actual data and data warehouse. So if something changed in the data warehouse, we just wouldn't know anything about it. We had to manually check, go and revisit. Once you set up this docs through DBT, that's all done by you. I mean, it won't change it on its own, but if something changes, upstream in the sources referencing, it will throw an error, and you'll know. You'll be able to change it. But it's good to have that kind of alert. And yes, and we have also to learn how to use Jinja. It's not a full-blown language in itself, but it's a way, let's say, like to create routines in like some of the operations you do. It's the essence behind the ref and source functions, which are what powers what the documentation. What you use to actually use the documentation, but more importantly, it's what powers the lineage graphs and the dependency graphs that we'll see in a bit. The few models we had running, we had to convert them to the DBT logic, which wasn't a big stretch for most of them, but some, like the attribution model, that has some recursive, self-modifying logic. It was easier to implement, in a step-by-step Python pipeline that executes SQL commands, rather than having DBT kind of modify things as it's creating them. And plus, that's kind of a nuisance, but definitely we ran into it a few times. You can't quite assign data types to the columns you're dealing with. It's all implied based on the data sources you're building your model with. So if you have a transaction table with, I don't know, a user created string, which is a timestamp, it would just take it as a timestamp. You want to convert it to text, you have to do some workarounds around it, which can be done. It's just a nuisance, I would say. We didn't have at the start, and again, we've had DBT for 3 years now. We came a few months on the line. We now have a way to trigger on-demand jobs through the Jenkins UI, which is the tool we use for CI/CD. And it's very powerful, very easy to use, just a couple of clicks. It's a build with parameters option if you use Jenkins that we can use to manually trigger any DAG, any DBT pipeline. Maybe put some parameters to be able to fine tune those. Very powerful, very easy to use. And we use I guess it's quite standard. We have an Elasticsearch cluster with Kibana as the visualization engine. We still use that, but we also had an in-house built Python logger. We scrapped that and we just went with the out-of-the-box DBT logging because it is very powerful. Maybe a bit of a hassle to implement, but it works very well right now. Okay, let's look at where we are today. How are we with time? I don't see my timer. Oh, okay. So right now we have 800 data models, a combination of 6 DBT projects, which are a combination of region and environment. Again, we have EU and US plus 3 environments. A lot of them, they're based on tags and the teams they support. Ops, marketing, whatnot. We run DBT on a KS Kubernetes cluster using the built-in scheduler, Jenkins for in-demand execution, as I said. We use, I think, all the DBT objects that exist, from models to seed tables, which are kind of like manual CSV pushes that create, static tables. To test, so someone mentioned snapshots. We also use snapshots, very powerful. It's actually just starting out. And sources, which are the documentation markdown files I mentioned. Tags, which is think of as a DBT pipeline. We have a bunch of them. It's a combination of frequency that you see some here, and then the regions we run them in, US versus Europe. And then very powerful function. You're able to know, we're just adding really one line to your data source definition to perform freshness checks on whether the data that is contained in them is stale or not, just based on some timestamp columns that you define. Some complications, that we didn't really foresee when we went about this. I mentioned about, I talked about a lot of leeway, a lot of, let's say, independence. Turns out just knowing declarative SQL is not enough to stand up a very efficient or just well-functioning DBT project. We grown too wild and too tight, so the dependency network which you see, the lineage graph which you see on the right, it's quite dense, and it's made it for daily DAG, which is our main one, to be quite fragile, honestly. Just like one model, one forgotten model that somehow is linked to other ones fails, and the entire pipeline is stopped. So we have to go there, check what went wrong, and then manually trigger updates. And then on a different end, we're not very well aware of the dependencies outside of the service that runs DBT. For example, that light automation one, they create some of the data that then feeds in the models DBT creates. They're not very well aware of each other, so they sometimes DBT job will run even though the data sources upstream are not up to date. We're working on that, and yes, it's one of the things we have planned for the future. Some more complications. This is more about the deployment strategy. We use Kubernetes for anything N26. Turns out it's very well suited for high availability services, anything that has to be constantly be able to be pinged and and respond. That's not our case. Data services mostly execute jobs in a given time schedule or manual. So we had times of ROG, Kubernetes pods just shutting down their own, starting again twice, or just running twice at the same time because the first one didn't shut down. Definitely complicated, but just it is what it is. This is the platform we have to deal with, and then also reflection of just a bit maybe too much too much autonomy. We definitely went a bit too granular with the models we created. Some just approach one use case or one product manager's desire. So that's probably one of the reasons why we have this thick and big DAG. And this is a very recent outcome. We have a problem with Redshift, which I'm not too happy with. Having some timeout problems that actually are very not common there, but they're known. There's a DBT issue being open on the repo for DBT, and we're possibly moving to a different data warehouse service in the future. Maybe BigQuery. We're looking into that. Nothing is certain yet. Then, what's up ahead? I mentioned some of the challenges we have. To address them, we are thinking of standing up a new, properly analytics engineering team that will bring us the expertise we know to get in the next stage, right, of the growth of the data team, and bring some sound and rigorous, if you will, data warehousing principles to our DBT projects. We want to move more proper business analytics responsibilities into the proper business departments. Think the embedded analysts I mentioned too. We don't have them now. We want to have those, and then have more of a core data team, mostly looking either at data infrastructure or analytics engineering. And then this is something I'm very excited about: an orchestrator named probably Airflow. We're looking at maybe Airflow, to solve the blind spots we have in terms of managing dependencies, right, in between services, namely. Also, being able to retrigger a pipeline if it doesn't go well. As I mentioned, right now, we alert them when it fails, but we have to go into the interface in Jenkins and trigger manually. That could be done, very gracefully, in a very automated fashion with an orchestrator, and also use the logs, which are not saying that DBT plus what's it called, Kibana is not powerful enough, but definitely the logs I've seen are better. I have more tests. We run some. We're not so strict on them. Right now, most of them don't trigger a general failure of the DAG. And I have some standardization. For example, we're looking at SQL Fluff, which is a Python library, to introduce some standardized SQL syntax, kind of as a unit test in the development pipeline for our DBT project. Okay, are we looking at time? All right, just about ready. That was my last slide. Thank you for your time, and I'll say let's open the stage for questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carlo. So we did get a few fun questions from the audience. First one is from Amy Shapiro. I struggle to choose the right level of extraction to use in DBT. Any tips here?
Abstraction meaning how granular you want to go with the type of models you're working with?
Let's assume that is the question. Amy, if you want to clarify, you're welcome to in the chat. We'll wait on that one.
Yeah, I can answer the other one.
Clarify. Perfect.
DBT, some of it is honestly, so it was an idea that actually the data warehousing engineering team I mentioned proposed maybe a way to make us, be able to do stuff on their own. It was also it was 2019. I think DBT was getting a lot of press. It was the hot topic and tool at the moment. Sometimes it's fashion, but in this case, it was warranted. It worked very well with the type of setup we had. Again, it's all based on Python, which is our production language, so it just fit very, very nicely in what we were already standing at that time. We're thinking of using Airflow as a way to orchestrate DBT, but they do slightly different things.
Gotcha.
Is a question for you. How long did it take you and your team to learn and implement DBT? It took definitely 2 months just to have it running. First, we just had seed tables, which are like manual pushes of data. And then probably I would say 6 months. But our project was very, very small at the start. We just expanded progressively. And as I mentioned, a bit maybe too generously, if you will. Longer than expected to learn and implement? We're looking at time. Okay.
No, we're looking great on time. I was just curious. Yeah, that's something I'm curious about. Like, what was one thing when you were implementing where you were just like, wow, okay, we need to learn a lot more, or like this is taking longer than expected?
Yeah, and I guess it's a result of what we have now, how to write like production grade efficient SQL. Lots of things we were doing with SQL where, declarative, as I said, build this dashboard, that obviously has to run, but only when it's queried, or extract this data, I don't know, to do this analysis with, Jupyter Notebook, visualize it. When you talk about SQL in production, things have to be, up to snuff, have to work all the time. They don't have to be inefficient. We had, honestly, for years, we had DBT DAGs, so like the run, the pipeline just taking a long time, and honestly blocking everything else that was happening on the data warehouse, especially in the US, where I think we had a small Postgres instance at the start, and that was problematic. Like, so I would say being able to learn how to write efficient SQL that just works well with everything else that you have in your data infrastructure.
Okay. And going back to Amy's question, this will be the last one we'll answer here. Let me pull that up. So, she struggled to choose the right level of abstraction. And by that, she was referring to sort of like hard coding models in SQL versus using multiple extractions like macros and variables. So it sounds she's understood like the first part of DBT, kind of building a very simple model, but then it's like scaling it through macros and extractions and whatnot.
That's a good question. I think it depends on the stage where your project is in. Now we extract a bit more. We have a lot of more macros than we used to. I think we had the first macro after 1 year of full-time DBT usage. We didn't see the point, but no, we definitely do see it now. I would say the more complex your project gets, the more you want to play with the advanced tools. Like, one thing we're trying now is snapshots, which is a way to also like document if the result of the DBT pipeline is as you expected, and tests. Tests are very important. They're fairly easy to stand up in DBT, and we're getting into them kind of now, and we should I would suggest anyone to with them. They're very easy to use.
Perfect. And that concludes this session with Carlo Scalisi. Carlo, thank you so much. If you guys have more questions for him, you can go to the top right of your screen where it says join the club, and you can ask Carlo any questions in the OA Slack channel. So thank you guys so much. Next, we will hear from Emil Vercade in about a minute. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Carlo.